The certified letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, hand-delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed Officer Darius Mitchell the thick envelope embossed with the Willow Creek Estates HOA seal. Inside was a formal complaint signed by HOA President Catherine Whitfield, demanding the immediate removal of Darius's dangerous and aggressive animal from the premises within 72 hours or face legal action, fines totaling $10,000, and potential forced sale of his property. The dangerous animal in question was currently sleeping on the porch, his head resting on massive paws, tongue lolling out in the kind of relaxed contentment that comes from a morning training session followed by lunch. Rex, 85 pounds of Belgian Malinois with a coat like burnished copper and eyes that could shift from gentle to lethal in a heartbeat, opened one eye as Darius read the letter, then went back to sleep with the confidence of a creature who'd never done anything wrong in his life. Because Rex hadn't done anything wrong. He was a certified police K-9, 7 years old, trained in narcotics detection, suspect apprehension, and search and rescue. He'd found missing children, located hidden drugs worth millions, and had twice saved Darius's life during suspect pursuits. He wore a badge on his collar that matched Darius's shield, was registered with the State Police K-9 unit, and had certifications from 3 different law enforcement training academies. He was by every legal and practical definition a working police dog with more official authority than most humans, and Catherine Whitfield wanted him banned from Willow Creek Estates because she'd decided he was dangerous. The complaint detailed Rex's alleged offences with the kind of creative fiction that would have been impressive if it wasn't so malicious. Aggressive barking at residents, threatening behaviour toward children, failure to maintain leash protocol, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation inconsistent with community standards. Every accusation was either false or deliberately misrepresented. Rex had barked twice in the past month, once when a delivery driver approached the house unexpectedly, once when a raccoon got into the garbage. He'd never shown aggression toward anyone, especially children, who he'd been specifically trained to be gentle with. The leash protocol violation referred to a morning when Darius had let Rex out in their fenced backyard, their private, fully enclosed backyard, to do his business. And the atmosphere of fear and intimidation was apparently created by Rex's existence as a large dog owned by a black police officer in a neighbourhood that Catherine Whitfield seemed to believe should remain both dog-free and demographically homogeneous. Darius had moved to Willow Creek 6 months ago after years of saving money on a police officer's salary, determined to buy a house in a good school district for his daughter Maya. The neighbourhood was beautiful. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, strong community amenities. He'd thought it would be perfect for raising his daughter after her mother's death 2 years ago, a place where Maya could heal and grow surrounded by stability. But from the first week, Catherine Whitfield had made it clear that Darius wasn't welcome. The complaints started small. His lawn was 1/4 inch too long. His car was parked facing the wrong direction. His garbage cans were visible from the street for 30 minutes past the approved pickup time. Each violation notice came with condescending language about community standards and neighborhood aesthetics that barely concealed the real message: people like him didn't belong here. The harassment escalated when Rex arrived. Darius had filed all the proper paperwork, registered Rex with the HOA as a working police K-9, provided documentation of his training and certification. The HOA bylaws explicitly exempted service animals and law enforcement K-9s from pet restrictions. Rex wasn't just allowed, he was legally protected. But Catherine Whitfield didn't care about laws or bylaws or documentation. She cared about control, about maintaining her vision of what Willow Creek should be, about using HOA authority to push out residents she didn't approve of. And if that meant inventing violations, fabricating complaints, and demanding the removal of a certified police K-9, she'd do it without hesitation. Darius read the letter 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of audacity and malice. She'd collected testimony from anonymous neighbors about Rex's alleged aggression. She'd photographed Rex in the backyard and claimed the images showed menacing behavior. She'd contacted animal control, who'd responded and found no violations, and was now citing their visit as evidence of problems. The deadline was clear. Remove the dog within 72 hours, or face escalating fines and legal action to force the sale of his property. Catherine Whitfield had declared war on a police K-9. She had no idea what that meant. Darius made 2 phone calls that afternoon. The first was to his captain, Marcus Henderson, a 28-year veteran who'd overseen the K-9 unit for the past decade and had little patience for civilians who thought they could dictate how police officers handled their certified partners. "She wants Rex removed from your property?" Henderson's voice carried disbelief mixed with anger. "Your certified K-9? Your working partner?" "Within 72 hours, Darius confirmed, "or she's filing for forced sale of my house." "On what grounds?" "She claims Rex is dangerous, has testimony from anonymous neighbors, says he's creating an atmosphere of fear." Henderson was quiet for 3 seconds. "Rex, who located 3 missing children last month? Rex, who's certified in child-friendly operations? Rex, who literally has gentle with civilians written in his training records?" "That's the one. Forward me everything, every document, every letter, every piece of communication from this HOA president. I'm escalating this to legal affairs. Nobody threatens a police K-9 and walks away clean." The second call was to Jennifer Park, an attorney who specialized in civil rights cases and had represented officers in several high-profile discrimination suits. She listened to the situation with the focused intensity of someone mentally building a case while documentation was still being described. "This is retaliation," Jennifer said immediately. "She's using HOA authority to harass you because she doesn't want you in the neighborhood. The dog is just the most recent weapon. How many violations have you received since moving in?" 47 in 6 months, Darius replied. "Everything from lawn height to paint color to parking orientation. I've paid about $3,000 in fines for violations that either don't exist or are never enforced against other residents. And Rex is exempt under both HOA bylaws and state law protecting working police K-9s. Completely exempt. I have documentation from 3 different legal sources confirming it." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Mitchell, I think you're going to want to attend the next HOA board meeting, and I think you're going to want to bring documentation about Rex's actual role, not just that he's a police dog. I want his full record. Every child he's found, every life he's saved, every commendation he's received. Why? Because Catherine Whitfield is about to learn the difference between a pet and a certified law enforcement officer who happens to have 4 legs." The next morning, Darius woke to find graffiti spray-painted on his fence. "No vicious dogs." The police report he filed included photographs, timeline, and a list of neighbors whose security cameras might have captured the vandalism. By afternoon, footage from 2 different sources showed a teenager spray-painting the fence at 2:00 a.m., a teenager who lived 3 houses down from Catherine Whitfield and whose mother was on the HOA board. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Systematic harassment targeting a black police officer, using a certified K-9 as the justification for escalation. But what Catherine Whitfield didn't know, what she'd discover in the most public way possible, was that Rex wasn't just any police K-9. He was a decorated canine, with a record that included 47 narcotic seizures, 19 suspect apprehensions, and 8 search and rescue operations resulting in lives saved. He'd been featured in local news 3 times for his work. He'd received commendations from the mayor, the police chief, and a state senator. He'd been invited to demonstrate his skills at schools, community centers, and public safety events. Rex was, in law enforcement circles, something of a celebrity, and attacking a celebrity canine, it turned out, drew attention from people Catherine Whitfield hadn't anticipated. The story broke on Thursday morning when a local reporter named Amanda Chen, who'd done a feature on Rex 8 months ago after he found a missing 5-year-old in a snowstorm, received an anonymous tip about the HOA demanding his removal. Her article hit the paper's website at 6:00 a.m. Local HOA demands removal of hero police canine, threatens officer with forced home sale. By 8:00 a.m., it had been shared 50,000 times. By noon, it was national news. By 3:00 p.m., Catherine Whitfield's phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, angry calls from residents who'd just learned what their HOA president had been doing, and messages from lawyers pointing out that she'd just opened the HOA to massive legal liability. Amanda's article didn't just report the basic facts. It included Rex's full service record, complete with photos of the children he'd found, the drugs he'd seized, the suspects he'd apprehended. It quoted the parents of rescued children thanking Rex for saving their babies. It featured statements from Darius's captain about Rex's exemplary record and his importance to community safety. And it detailed the pattern of harassment against Darius, the 47 violations in 6 months, the escalating fines, the graffiti vandalism, all suggesting racial discrimination disguised as HOA enforcement. The contrast was devastating. A hero dog being targeted for removal by an HOA president with a history of harassing the neighborhood's only black family. What Amanda discovered next, though, changed everything from a civil dispute into potential criminal territory. In researching the story, she'd reviewed the HOA's financial records, public documents that had been filed with the county. She'd noticed irregularities, unexplained payments to consulting firms, inflated costs for routine maintenance, contracts awarded without competitive bidding to companies that seemed to exist only on paper. She'd sent the records to a forensic accountant friend who'd found something remarkable. Catherine Whitfield had been embezzling from the HOA for at least 3 years, using shell companies to funnel approximately $400,000 in association funds to accounts she controlled. The scheme was elaborate but not sophisticated. She'd created fake vendors for landscaping, security, and maintenance. She'd awarded contracts to these non-existent companies, paid them with HOA funds, and deposited the money in accounts linked back to her personal finances. And she'd covered the losses by aggressively fining residents for violations, real or invented, generating enough revenue from harassment to hide the embezzlement. Darius had been receiving so many violation notices, not because he was actually violating rules, but because Catherine needed to generate fine revenue to cover her theft. The campaign against Rex wasn't just racial harassment. It was part of a broader pattern of financial fraud that had victimized the entire community. Amanda published her follow-up article Thursday evening. HOA president accused of embezzling $400K while harassing hero K9 officer. That's when everything exploded. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning, mandatory attendance for all residents, with Catherine Whitfield desperately trying to maintain control over a situation that had spiraled completely beyond her ability to manage. The clubhouse was packed beyond capacity, with residents standing in hallways, local news cameras set up in the back, and a palpable anger in the air that suggested this meeting would reshape everything. Darius arrived with Rex at his side, the dog wearing his official police K9 vest with his badge clearly visible. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Several families approached to thank him for his service. Children asked if they could pet Rex. Darius supervised carefully, and Rex was gentle as always. Residents apologized for not speaking up sooner about Catherine's harassment. Captain Henderson attended in full uniform, bringing the weight of the police department's authority. Jennifer Park came with a briefcase full of documentation and the confident expression of a lawyer who knew she held all the winning cards. Amanda Chen positioned herself near the front, recorder running, capturing every moment. Catherine Whitfield sat at the head table, looking like a woman watching her world collapse in real time. Her lawyer, a nervous man who'd clearly advised against this meeting but been overruled, kept whispering urgent counsel that she ignored. The rest of the board sat at a distance, visibly separating themselves from the president they'd elected. The meeting opened with Catherine trying to establish control, but she'd barely spoken 3 sentences when Captain Henderson stood. "Mrs. Whitfield, before you continue, I need to address the complaint you filed against Officer Mitchell and K9 Rex. As the commanding officer overseeing our K9 unit, I have responsibility for ensuring our working dogs and their handlers are protected from harassment." "This is HOA business," Catherine started. "This is criminal harassment of a law enforcement officer and interference with a working police K9, Henderson interrupted, his voice carrying command authority that made civilian titles irrelevant. "Officer Mitchell has filed a formal complaint with our Legal Affairs Division. Rex is a certified police K9, exempt from all pet restrictions under both state law and your own HOA bylaws. Your demand for his removal is illegal." He pulled out documents, distributing copies to the board and the assembled residents. Rex's service record: 47 narcotic seizures, 19 suspect apprehensions, 8 search and rescue operations, 3 commendations from the mayor, 5 letters of appreciation from families whose children he found, 0 incidents of aggression, 0 complaints from any legitimate source. Catherine's face had gone pale. "I have testimony from residents. You have anonymous accusations that you either fabricated or solicited from people you intimidated," Jennifer Park stated, standing beside Henderson. "We've interviewed 17 residents in the past 3 days. None of them have any complaints about Rex. Several reported that you approached them asking for statements against Officer Mitchell, and they refused." She placed her own documents on the table. "You've issued 47 violation notices to my client in 6 months. We've reviewed the same period for other residents. White homeowners received an average of 2.3 violations in the same time frame. Officer Mitchell received 20 times more violations for infractions that either don't exist or are never enforced against others. That's textbook discrimination." "The violations were legitimate," Catherine protested. "The violations were revenue generation," Amanda Chen said, standing now with her phone displaying her article. "According to forensic analysis of HOA financial records, you've embezzled approximately $400,000 over 3 years using fake vendors and shell companies. You've covered the theft by aggressively fining residents to generate revenue." The room erupted, residents shouting questions, board members demanding to see the evidence, Catherine's lawyer attempting to silence his client who wouldn't stop protesting her innocence. Darius stood, and Rex rose with him, perfectly disciplined, sitting at attention beside his handler. The room gradually quieted, drawn by the silent authority of a working K9 team. "Mrs. Whitfield," Darius said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the packed clubhouse. "You've spent 6 months trying to drive me out of this neighborhood. 47 violations, $3,000 in fines, constant harassment, graffiti on my fence, And finally, you tried to take away my partner, a certified police K9 who saved lives and kept this community safe. He looked at the assembled residents. But you didn't just target me. You've been stealing from this entire community, using HOA authority to embezzle hundreds of thousands of dollars, hiding your theft by harassing residents and generating fine revenue. You've victimized everyone here. Rex shifted slightly, and the movement drew every eye. The contrast was perfect. A disciplined, working K9 beside his handler, facing a woman who'd abused every bit of authority she'd been given. I'm not the problem in this neighborhood, Darius continued. Rex isn't the problem. The problem is someone who sees authority as an opportunity to steal and harass. Someone who uses rules to target people she doesn't want here. Someone who thinks a badge on a dog is less legitimate than a title on a nameplate. Catherine stood, trying one final time to assert control. This is slander. I've done nothing wrong. You've done everything wrong, Jennifer Park interrupted, and you're going to answer for all of it. Criminal charges for embezzlement, civil liability for discrimination, personal liability for harassment. By the time we're finished, Mrs. Whitfield, you'll understand exactly what happens when someone attacks a police officer and his K9 partner. The board secretary stood, visibly shaking. I'm calling for an emergency vote to remove Catherine Whitfield as HOA president, effective immediately. Second, 3 other board members said simultaneously. The vote was unanimous, 6-0, with Catherine abstaining because she was too busy screaming about conspiracies and legal action and how this was all a misunderstanding. 2 months later, Darius sat on his front porch watching Maya play fetch with Rex in the yard that Catherine Whitfield had once cited for grass height violations. The neighborhood looked the same houses, same streets, same trees turning colors as fall approached. But everything was different. Catherine Whitfield had been criminally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and filing false police reports. She'd resigned from the HOA board, sold her house at a significant loss, and was awaiting trial while her lawyer negotiated plea deals that would likely include prison time and full restitution. The HOA had been completely restructured, with new board members committed to transparent finances and fair enforcement. A forensic audit had recovered most of the stolen funds and identified exactly how Catherine had operated her scheme. Every violation notice she'd issued had been reviewed, and dozens were voided as fabricated or discriminatory. The graffiti on Darius's fence had been painted over by volunteers from the neighborhood, including families who'd admitted they'd stayed silent too long about Catherine's harassment. They'd replaced the hate speech with a mur, featuring Rex's police badge and the words, "community hero." But the real change was harder to quantify. It showed up in neighbors who now waved instead of glaring, in children who asked to meet Rex and learned about police K9 training, in families who'd apologized for their earlier coldness and explained they'd been afraid of Catherine's retaliation. Amanda Chen's articles had sparked conversations beyond Willow Creek Estates, prompting HOA reforms across the county and investigations into other associations suspected of using enforcement authority to discriminate or steal. Rex stretched out on the porch, his head in Darius's lap, completely relaxed in the way that working dogs are when they're home and safe. His ears twitched at every sound, perpetually alert even in rest, but his eyes were closed in contentment. "Dad," Maya called from the yard, "can Rex come to my school next week? My teacher said we could do a presentation about police dogs." "I'll check with Captain Henderson," Darius called back, "but I think Rex would love that." Rex's tail thumped against the porch at the sound of his name, and Maya ran over to hug him, the kind of fearless affection that children show to dogs they trust completely. Rex tolerated her enthusiasm with patient dignity, letting her scratch his ears and tell him about school. A car pulled up, Captain Henderson, out of uniform, coming to check on his officer and canine team like he did most weekends. He climbed the porch steps with a grin. "How's the neighborhood celebrity?" Henderson asked, gesturing to Rex. "Sleeping off his morning training session," Darius replied, "and dealing with his biggest fan." Maya was showing Rex a new toy, chattering about how she'd told her entire class about his work, about the lives he'd saved, about how he was a real police officer with a badge, just like her dad's. "She's not wrong," Henderson said. "Rex is as much a police officer as either of us. More decorated than most, actually. That's what Catherine Whitfield never understood. She wasn't attacking a pet. She was attacking a sworn law enforcement officer who happens to work on 4 legs instead of 2. Think she understands now? Facing 7 years in prison and $500,000 in restitution? Yeah, I think she's beginning to grasp the concept." Henderson sat beside Darius, watching Maya play with Rex. "You did good, Mitchell. You didn't back down, didn't let her intimidate you. Called for backup when you needed it. That's exactly what we train for." "I had a good partner," Darius said, his hand finding Rex's head, fingers scratching behind the ears that had been called threatening and dangerous by a woman who'd never understood what she was looking at. A working canine wasn't a pet to be banned or a problem to be removed. He was a partner, a colleague, a certified law enforcement officer with a record of service that most humans would envy. He was trained to find lost children and hidden drugs, to protect his handler and serve his community, to be gentle with civilians and fierce with threats. Catherine Whitfield had tried to ban him because she'd seen only what she wanted to see: a large dog owned by a black officer in a neighborhood she believed should remain white and pet-free. She hadn't seen Rex's badge, his training, his record, his purpose. She hadn't seen the children whose lives he'd saved or the families who thanked him for bringing their babies home. She hadn't seen the community that would rally around a working K-9 when his service was threatened. And she certainly hadn't anticipated that attacking a police K-9 would expose her own criminal enterprise and destroy the authority she'd abused for years. Maya threw the toy again, and Rex bounded after it with the enthusiasm of a dog who was excellent at his job and knew exactly where he belonged. He retrieved the toy, brought it back to Maya with perfect precision, then sat at attention awaiting her next command, the same discipline he brought to finding missing children or locating hidden narcotics. "You know what the best part is?" Henderson said. "Rex has no idea any of this happened. He doesn't know Catherine tried to have him removed, doesn't care about the HOA drama or the news coverage or the charges. He just knows he's home with his handler and his family, doing what he loves." "That's what working dogs do," Darius replied. "They serve without recognition, protect without praise, and love without condition. They don't need to know they're heroes. They just need to know they're needed." The sun was setting over Willow Creek Estates, painting the neighborhood in amber light that made everything look peaceful and permanent. Rex settled back on the porch, his work for the day complete, his family safe, his purpose fulfilled. Catherine Whitfield had tried to ban him from the neighborhood. She'd called him dangerous, aggressive, threatening. She'd demanded his removal under penalty of forced sale. But she'd fundamentally misunderstood what she was attacking. Not a pet, not a problem, not a disruption to community standards. A police officer with a badge, a record, and a community that understood his value better than she ever could. The HOA, Karen the tree, eyed to ban the K-9. The K-9 had a badge, and badges, it turned out, carried more authority than any HOA title ever would. Justice had arrived with a wagging tail and a service record that spoke louder than any fabricated complaints. Rex yawned, shifted his massive head, and went back to sleep. Just another day, protecting and serving. Just another victory for the good guys. Just another reminder that heroes come in all forms, and the ones with 4 legs and fur are just as real as those with 2 legs and shields. Catherine Whitfield learned that lesson too late, but she learned it completely, and that was enough.